Good morning. I am A.U.K. President Wynn Thompson, and in that capacity, I request that you please turn off your cell phones before we
Can you go just a
get
little
started.
bit down?
I just did had someone to do it for me since I'm not very proficient at that task. Ambassador Jacobson, Chairman A.U.K, members of the A.U.K Board of Trustees, students, faculty, staff, and guests. We are pleased today to have Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut on our campus and honored that he requested this opportunity to interact with the A.U.K community. Chris Murphy was elected to the United States Senate in November 2012 and serves on three very important committees: the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, the Joint Economic Committee, and most importantly, perhaps for our purposes today, the Committee on Foreign Relations, where he is chair of the European Subcommittee. Prior to his election to the Senate, Chris Murphy served 3 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives as congressman from the 5th District of Connecticut. There he served on the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, Energy and Commerce, and Financial Services. Before entering Congress, he served for 8 years in the Connecticut General Assembly, which is the state legislature, and practiced law in Hartford, which is the state capital. He grew up in Wethersfield, Connecticut, graduated from Williams College in Massachusetts, which many of you will recognize as one of the very finest liberal arts institutions in the United States, and he completed his law degree at the University of Connecticut, also known as UConn, when they are having basketball games. He and his wife Kathy are the proud parents of 2 sons, Owen and Ryder. A.U.K faculty, staff, and students will recognize the reference when I say that in his very impressive career, Senator Murphy has not taken the elevator to success. He has truly climbed the stairs, and at a most impressive rate. As an example to our students and our alumni, he reached the top before he attained the age of 40, or almost the top. There may be only 1 or 2 other things that I can think of that might be attainments beyond the present one. After his presentation, Senator Murphy will respond to questions and visit with students. We are happy to have the media representatives present, but note that the questions are limited to A.U.K students and, if time permits, to faculty and staff. Student Government President Edison Yakurti will recognize students for your questions, which should be succinctly stated and directed only to the senator. We ask that you use your microphones since the event is being streamed. Please join me in welcoming Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut.
Well, thank you very much, President Thompson. Thank you to our great Ambassador Tracy Jacobson, who has welcomed me and my team here to Pristina. She has done a credible and laudatory job as our ambassador here in Kosovo. We know that you appreciate her as much as we do. To my great friend, Richard Lukai, the member of the Board of Trustees here, thank you as well for your great friendship to me. It is true that I asked to come speak here today, despite my voice that you can feel and hear trailing off. We are at the end of a very busy week, my first trip to the Balkan region, and I've lost a little bit of my speaking power as I have been up on many stages over the course of the week. But to me, this is one of the most important visits of my trip. First and foremost, because my good friend Richard has talked to me over the years about the story of this university, starting with humble beginnings with 30 or 40 students, growing to 600 today with results that mirror and often are better than your compatriots at RIT in the United States, and now a growing legacy of students who have graduated from A.U.K. and are now in the midst of powering forward Kosovo in the political realm, in the cultural realm, and in the economic realm. From 40 to 600 is a wonderful story, but I'm here in part because I want to be part of the story of A.U.K's continued expansion. I want to be someone that is seen as helpful in allowing A.U.K to expand its reach so that more young people here in Kosovo can enjoy the opportunity that you have. I'm going to leave most of my time for questions here today, but I want to speak to you personally as the youngest member of the United States Senate. I know I don't look that young, but I am actually the youngest member of the 100-member United States Senate. But I got my start when I was about your age, just a few years older. I first ran for political office in Connecticut, my home state on the East Coast of the United States, when I was 24 years old. And I don't come from a particularly powerful family. My parents weren't involved in politics. They weren't elected to office. I didn't inherit any particular advantage or privileged position. But I looked around at my generation in the United States, and I saw just absolutely endemic disaffection with politics. You know, in the United States, only about 20% of 20-year-olds turn out to vote at the polls. Now, we have overall participation rates that are fairly good. In presidential campaigns, we get 65, 70% of Americans to turn out to vote, but we have miserable turnout when it comes to young people, and it's in part because, and this will be familiar to you, young people in the United States just aren't sure that politicians are speaking for them. They're not confident that the people in power understand the struggles that students and young graduates are going through as they try to put together the money to pay for education and then find a way to pay it back. They're not sure that they're getting the right skill sets to compete in an increasingly global economy. And so I decided to do something about it. I graduated college and I watched so many of my friends not even consider a career in public life that I decided to try to set an example. And so when I was 24 years old, I decided to run for the state legislature in Connecticut. And I want to just briefly share this story with you before I talk about more parochial and local issues here in Kosovo and Pristina. Because what I found in my experience of running for office, even in a modern, mature democracy like the United States, is that young people in the United States, but I would argue all across the world, enjoy both an advantage and a responsibility when they choose to stand up and make their voice heard. What I did in my first campaign for Congress was not revolutionary. I didn't have a lot of money, I didn't have a lot of contacts, I didn't have a lot of influential friends, and so I just decided to go out and start knocking on doors. Now, I don't know if this is a tradition of democracy here in Kosovo, but in the United States, it's the way that people used to campaign for office. A candidate would just start walking down the street and knocking on their neighbors' doors and introducing them, and telling them who they are and what they believe in. All I had was time and energy and a bunch of pairs of shoes, and I went out, and every night I'd knock on 50 doors in my constituency. And every Saturday I'd knock on 100 to 150 doors, and every Sunday I'd knock on 100 to 150 doors. And I just started introducing myself to voters day after day after day, night after night after night. I knocked on 8,000 doors over the course of the campaign, 8,000 individual homes I visited. And what I found was that I had, as a young candidate for office, a double advantage. The first thing that happened was that my opponent underestimated me. I was running against someone who had been in politics for a long time, who had never really received an electoral challenge. And he simply didn't think that there would be any contest in that a relatively powerless, unconnected 24-year-old was running against him. And so he didn't mount much of a campaign up until the very last few days when he realized that maybe I had done a little bit more to win votes than he had thought. But the second thing that happened was that when I did knock on those doors, when I did make those connections with people, they paid more attention to the message that I was sending, because in that I was a young person speaking up for my values and for my generation, I was unique. They hadn't seen someone of my age participating in the process at this level, certainly not knocking on their door. And so I got more attention as I went through that first campaign for office because I was young. And I recognized very early on that there was this unique power in young people participating in the civic process. The status quo, the powers that be, they underestimated me. They underestimated many of my young colleagues who took on the same challenge in other places. But my voice, when I made it heard, was elevated because of the uniqueness of young people speaking truth to power, speaking in the political process or the civic process. And I spend a lot of my time in the United States speaking to student groups like this, because I think that that is close to a universal truth in life. And I think that because of that advantage that I found, an unexpected advantage, I would argue, in that most of the lessons that we've been taught as young leaders, and you are all young leaders by virtue of the gift that you have been given as students at A.U.K, the minute you leave this place, you will have the burden of being young leaders in your community. But the story that we have historically been told is that you have to wait in line, that you have to pay your dues. You have to wait until you've been tapped on the shoulder to inherit a position of leadership. That simply isn't true. It's certainly not true in the United States, despite that impression. I imagine it's not true here as well. And of course, it can't be true in Kosovo, because the majority of the population here is young. You are the built-in majority of this new young nation. And so if you aren't stepping up to positions of leadership now, next year, 5 years from now, then there is no future for this country. And so I think the burden on youth is great no matter where you are, but your particular burden, your responsibility, indeed your opportunity, is elevated here in Kosovo. You know that you have no greater friend than the United States. I am just but the leading visiting edge of hundreds of members of the Senate and the House of Representatives who have been so proud, who have been so humbled over the course of the last decade to stand with Kosovo as you have marched down your path to independence. We know how difficult a road it has been, but we see the hope for prosperity in this new nation. I see it in the eyes of Kosovars as I travel on this very brief trip. I had the chance to meet with a small group of student leaders this morning at the hotel in which I'm staying, and their message to me was all the same, that despite all of the challenges, that what defines this nation, certainly what defines your generation, is a unique sense of optimism about the future. And my primary mission in being here this week is to reaffirm the partnership of the United States and Kosovo, and to applaud you for the progress that you have made. 5 years ago, we could have never imagined that we would be talking today about substantive steps being taken to normalize relations between Kosovo and Serbia. That's a historic agreement. And we know that what is important now is the details of implementation, but what should not be lost on us as we debate the necessity to move forward on the implementation of that agreement is that that agreement still stands as historic and unprecedented, unexpected if you had asked many people where they thought Serbia and Kosovo would be 5 years ago. This university is a demonstrable achievement in what continues to be a great story of educational and economic progress. No one's going to be satisfied with the rates of unemployment, and particularly the rates of youth unemployment that still persist here in Kosovo, but your economy is growing. Foreign investors are more interested today in Kosovo than ever before, and the amounts of money that the United States seeks to invest here is primarily dedicated to the continued economic expansion of this country. And in many other ways, Kosovo is leading the world with respect to some of the most vexing problems of our globe. I had the chance last evening to spend about an hour with your wonderful president, and I applauded her on the efforts that this nation has made to root out extremism, to arrest those who would try to twist a religion and an ideology for violent purposes. The world is appreciative of your government's efforts on that front as well. And so, over and over again, we are confronted in this region and in Kosovo with the challenges, but we shouldn't let that stop us from appreciating how much progress has been made. I met only yesterday with your president. I did not meet with the political leadership here. And I will simply say this about this difficult political moment here in Kosovo. You have many friends in the United States Congress. It is much easier for us to be friends when there is a government that we can align with and do business with. And we in the United States Senate are constantly confronted with situations in which we have our own political priorities and prejudices that stop us from entering into coalitions that make a difference for the country. And while there's a lot of attention about the level of dissension between the two parties in Washington, time and time again, we have been able to prove that when a crisis arises in the United States, the two parties can come together to solve it for the benefit of the nation. And that's what we are hopeful, that's what Americans are hopeful will happen here in Kosovo. That in short order, the political parties will be able to set aside their individual political prejudices and create a coalition that involves personal sacrifice for the betterment of the nation. That's what a democracy really is about. Not letting, as we say in America, the perfect be the enemy of the good. And our hope is that in very short order, friends of Kosovo will be able to visit this great capital and meet not only with the president, but sit down and meet with a new government as well. That will make it much easier for people like me who are invested in this relationship to be able to carry out good works on your behalf in Washington and in capitals all across this world. Thank you for inviting me here to be with you this afternoon, this morning. Thank you for your desire to step up, better yourselves, and then inherit and accept this responsibility that will come to you by virtue of the degree that you're going to be granted here. This is a moment in time that the history books will write about. Right? What you do with the next several years in this country's development is going to be a period of time that students at this university at high schools and at secondary schools and elementary schools all across the region will study for years. The burden is great, the responsibility is great, but the opportunity is just as momentous. You have great resources here, great challenges, but as I have been told over and over again in my visit, all of that is defined by the inherent optimism of young people here in Kosovo. That will leave me just as optimistic as you as I return to the United States. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Thank you very much, Senator. We will now ask the SGA president to call upon students for their questions.
Thank you, Senator Murphy. I believe that your speech is going to raise a number of questions. Yes, Alketa?
Hello, welcome, Senator Murphy. I am Alketa Bucay. I'm a sophomore student at A.U.K. And my question is, the U.S. has helped Kosovo during the war and after the war. Do you think that U.S. could intensify the help offered to the youth of Kosovo through education? Thank you.
Thank you. I think the short answer is, of course, yes. Listen, the hope of this nation is in the youth that are here today, but you can't be the future of this nation without the tools that are necessary in order to guide it to a better place. And at the root of that toolbox is education. And that is certainly a place where the United States can help in a variety of ways. Certainly assistance in direct dollars to try to assist the development of education here in Kosovo is most helpful. We're having a major debate in the United States right now about the issue of foreign aid. Many people in the United States, many of my voters, think that foreign aid comprises 1/3 of the United States budget. Of course, the truth is that it comprises less than 1% of the U.S. budget. And as the ambassador knows, the reality is that as the U.S. attention has been focused on Iraq and Afghanistan with an announced new emphasis on Southeast Asia, we've seen a diminution in foreign aid that is available for countries in Europe and in the Balkans. That's part of the reason that I made this trip this week, because I am a believer that a relatively small infusion of U.S. aid dollars into this region right now, at this very pivotal moment, can make a huge difference. This is not the moment where we should be walking away from our historic commitment to Kosovo. We should be leaning in to that commitment. And so my hope is that we can win this political fight in the United States over the course of the next year or so and be able to deliver more aid dollars to help education prosper here. I'm not going to tell you that that's an easy fight to win. We have a group of people in the United States House of Representatives primarily that, if they could, would completely eliminate the U.S. foreign aid budget. Now that happens during difficult economic times. Historically, when the United States goes through deep recessions as we have, many politicians look inward rather than look outward. But because of the nature of this pivotal moment here in Kosovo and in the region, this is a moment to me where we should be making that investment. We also have tremendous expertise that we can lend as well. And so we've talked a lot in this trip about exchange programs. I'd like to see us have much more robust exchange programs. I want more students and young people to have experiences in the United States for a variety of reasons. I think that expands your horizons, improves the view that people have of the United States in the region. But I'd also like to see an exchange going the other way as well. We've opened up a new Peace Corps program here in Kosovo. We hope to be able to double the number of volunteers who are here. But we also have a lot of other people who are wonderful education administrators, wonderful teachers, wonderful teacher trainers who can come here to Kosovo and help expand your progress on educational policy. And so exchange programs are very, very important to me as a young United States Senator, but it's important to me that they run in both directions because particularly on this issue, that can be of great assistance.
Thank you, Senator Murphy. Any other questions? Yes, Grant.
Thank you. My name is Dranko Lica, and I'm a senior here. And my question is, how do you think that the political situation in Kosovo can be solved? And also, should the international community intervene?
Well, I don't have any specific view on what the new coalition should look like. And ultimately, if you want to have a real, functioning, thriving democracy, the decisions about who leads have to come organically. They have to come from your own leaders. They have to be guided by the wishes and the desires of the people of Kosovo. Now, there is, of course, a very robust recent history of international intervention here, and that history may make it easy for some to think that the solution lies in, once again, relying on outsiders to influence an internal process. But you're an independent nation now. And with that comes the opportunity and responsibility to make political decisions first based on internal needs. I know that we will provide assistance to the new government, but our preference, of course, is for the decision about this new coalition to be one that is decided here in Kosovo rather than by the United States or by any other international partners.
Yes, Milad.
Hello, Senator. My name is Milad Bourani, and I'm a junior here at A.U.K. Bechtel-Lenka is a consortium that has been building the major highways here in Kosovo. Ex-Ambassador Chris Dell vocally supported this project, and right after that, he was offered after he finished his job here in Kosovo, he was offered a position in the Bechtel Corporation. My question to you is, how would you comment on this situation?
Well, I don't know the details of that particular situation, so I can't comment on that. Listen, I can comment on the project, which we clearly have been supporters of. Certainly, it strikes me in my travels just briefly over the course of the week through the region that one of the clearly necessary investments here is in infrastructure. As I talk to U.S. companies, as I have throughout my trip and in preparation for my trip, one of the greatest barriers to foreign investment in Kosovo and in the region is the lack of interconnections between the major capitals, and the primary deficit is in surface transportation. And so we're going to continue to push forward that priority, which is the United States partnering with our friends in the region to build infrastructure. But I can't specifically comment on that case. I just don't know the details of it.
Fitim.
I'm Fitim, and I'm a senior. My question is that the perception in Kosovo is that the embassies are the main decision makers here. So do you think that Kosovo should make its own decisions, or it should be how we actually think it is?
Yeah. Again, I sort of referenced this in my prior question. Clearly, because there is a history of serious international and American engagement in Kosovo for beneficial purposes, the impression may continue to be that influence is outsized beyond reality. I only met during this trip with the president. I did not meet and have no plans to meet with the representatives of the various political parties. Had I met with them, it would not have been with the intention of trying to influence the outcome of these coalition negotiations. But I simply didn't want to even leave the impression that I was here as a representative of the United States Senate to try to guide that coalition. I met with the president last night, and I applauded her on her efforts to try to help form a government. I told her that I believe that she is in a unique position, having no particular political affiliation, being seen as a singularly incorruptible figure within the government. I thought she was in a very unique position in order to guide this new government into power. But I made the decision to refrain from meeting with the political parties so that it was clear that the U.S. priority is on allowing this process to happen organically.
Yes, Tringa.
Hi, I'm Tringa, a junior student here in A.U.K. I would like to know your stand on the unification of Albanian territories or even states.
Well, you know, I got this question in a previous stop. I have a very strong Albanian American population in the United States, and Richard is a leading member of that population. And I'm constantly in dialogue with my Albanian American constituents about their concerns for the region, representing many of the concerns of family members and friends that they are still in contact with. And my discussions with my constituents, representing many of the views back home, is not about a greater Albania, it's about being treated fairly in whatever country they live in. And that's my focus here in the region. My focus in the region is on making sure that wherever Albanians live, whether it be in Serbia or Montenegro, Macedonia, or Kosovo, that they are treated fairly under the law. And of course, for all of the faults of the United States, our great strength that we hope to be able to deliver to the rest of the world is the ability for people from all different ethnic backgrounds to be able to come to our country and, while retaining so much of their cultural heritage, be able to become something which is also uniquely American, and to be able to enjoy all of the rights and privileges of being an American citizen. That does not mean that we haven't had a history of discrimination. I'm an Irish American, and my ancestors were treated very badly when they initially came to the United States, but only a generation later, Irish Americans were in the highest positions of government and commerce and culture and society. And so, you know, in the United States, we are getting better every day at being able to blend ethnicities and traditions together. And ultimately, the reality is that people are going to move. There's never going to be an ability to simply create a world in which you draw state borders around particular peoples. It is much more important to find a way for people to coexist, and that is the priority for my trip, and I think the priority of U.S. policy in the region.
Thank you. Arlind.
Hello, I am Arlind Lepoya, a junior here at the UK. My question is, Article 1.3 of Kosovo's constitution says, "The Republic of Kosovo shall have no territorial claims against and shall seek no union with any state or part of any state." My question is, do you think that this violates our republic right for self-determination?
Some questions you're going to ask me I'm not going to be able to opine on. I am not an expert on the Kosovo Constitution, and so I will have to defer to those that know the history, the lineage, and the details of that document. So I apologize for not being able to give you a specific answer to that question.
Thank you, Arlind. Dritro.
Hello, I'm Dritro. I'm a senior student here at A.U.K. My question might be a little specific, but maybe you can give us an insight. Since 2008, Kosovo has been enjoying trade privileges with America under the GSP program for certain manufactured goods, minerals, and light agricultural products. However, we don't enjoy such privileges on the services. And on the recent years, the business process outsourcing and the IT sector has been booming in Kosovo. I wanted to know if there is some type of agreement that we could make to promote services, and if yes, what we as A.U.K students can do to promote that. Thank you.
Well, the GSP program is incredibly important for the United States and for many of our friends around the world. I'll be happy to take a look at your question as to whether we can do more to try to include services within that rubric. But what I can say is this. The United States and Europe right now are negotiating a free trade agreement, and the service economy will be at the heart of that agreement. We believe that we can sell more services into Europe, and Europe can be able to sell more services into the United States. We also think that we can set communal standards on the service sector, which we can export to the rest of the world. And so one of the reasons why I'm so excited about Kosovo's future, a European integrated future, is that many of the trade preferences that are going to help accelerate this economy forward are going to be found in a new trade agreement between the United States and Europe that's being negotiated now, that once Kosovo becomes part of the European Union, you will have the benefit of, and that would include the service sector as well. I can follow up with you or with the university on the question of whether we can do more specifically with respect to the GSP service sector issue, but my focus is on the much broader issue, which is integrating Kosovo into the European Union, integrating the European economy and the American economy together. That will be probably the most important thing that we can do to reach out and grow some of the expanding industries like the service sector industry here in Kosovo.
Anessa?
Welcome, Mr. Senator. I'm Anessa Topor, senior here in A.U.K. And my question would be, what's the politic of United States toward the developing countries, considering the challenge that they face from globalization as religious and political challenges? Thank you.
No, certainly. Well, I'll refer back to an answer to a question I gave before, which is that there are many of us who believe that this is a moment that the United States needs to recommit itself to the project of helping to finance projects in developing nations. And frankly, that's the right thing for the United States to do from two perspectives. First, as a global citizen, we have a responsibility to reach out a helping hand to the people of developing nations like Kosovo in order to provide a better standard of living for you and your families. We all live on the same planet. We may speak different languages. We may have borders on maps that separate us, but we are all citizens of the same planet. We have responsibilities to each other. But second, and more parochially, it's the right thing to do for U.S. economic interests. We have great friends here in Kosovo, and to the extent that we are helping to build this economy, you are a natural trading partner for the United States. There is a relatively paltry amount of goods today that are moving from Kosovo into the United States. There's a huge opportunity to expand on our trade. In particular, the trade coming from Kosovo into the United States. That will come at a benefit to U.S. consumers and to U.S. businesses who will be at the heart of that increased trade. So, and listen, other countries understand this. The Chinese at the top of the list, right? The Chinese are today the biggest players in economic development aid in many parts of the globe. I just came from Montenegro, where they actually beat out a bid by a U.S. company to build a major new road there. In Africa, they're the biggest economic development, economic aid donors. Now, I will give the Chinese credit and hope that part of their policy is due to a desire, like the United States, to be a good global citizen. But I think that the majority of the reason for their investment in developing regions is because they see an economic opportunity for China to benefit from those developing economies having that tie created by that early economic development aid into those countries. And so I think that there are both economically selfish and globally selfless reasons for the United States to be investing. And again, I referenced this earlier, there is this fight happening in the United States. I ran for Congress in 2006 as an opponent of the war in Iraq, and I fundamentally believe that it is much better for the United States to spread our influence with economic aid and diplomatic influence than it is with military power. And so I am one of the leaders in the Congress of this fight and debate over how we shift resources from the military side over to the foreign and economic development side of the ledger. I think it's the right thing to do, and I frankly think it's the smart thing to do from strictly American interest standpoint.
In the interest of keeping the senator on his very tight schedule, we will take 2 more questions, please.
Liliana?
I'm Liliana, I'm a junior, and the U.S. government supports the American University in Cairo and the American University in Beirut. And my question is whether there is any possibility that the U.S. government could also support the American University in Kosovo.
That's a great question. Well, again, to use an American phrase, you are preaching to the choir on this matter. I've already written letters on the behalf of A.U.K. Attempting to find a similar position for A.U.K. as is enjoyed by other universities. You mentioned a few of them. Again, as I said, I think that it would be a very wise investment for the United States to support the work that you do. You are all lucky to be here, but more students could have access if, with some assistance from the U.S. government, tuition was able to be abated or more scholarships were able to be given. You obviously would love to have more course offerings, to have a greater variety of degrees. That can only happen if there's different sources of funding. I think the pitch that I have made and will continue to make to my colleagues in the United States is that the United States has invested so much in this nation. We continue to invest in this nation, still have 600, 700 troops within your borders. Having given so much on behalf of the United States taxpayers, now is not the moment to disinvest. And so because of this legacy of investment, hopefully we may be able to prevail upon this. But that was the reason that I wanted to come here. I hope I have been your champion in the United States Senate on this matter of trying to see if there are some U.S. resources to assist the university. And I wanted to come see it for myself so that I could go talk about the power of this university, the genius of its students on a first-hand basis to my colleagues. And I will leave here nothing but impressed, nothing but fulfilled in my expectations about the quality of this institution.
I guess this is going to be the last question, Shant.
Make it a really easy one.
Okay. Hello, Senator. My name is Shant Malisi. I'm a senior here at A.U.K. My question is, since we all know that Serbia's political system, or at least their foreign political system, is based mainly on hypocrite manners, I want to know what is America's or the U.S. government's the official approach, the diplomatic and political approach towards Serbia?
Thank you for that question. I was in Belgrade for a day and a half at the beginning of my visit. It was a busy week last week in Belgrade, to say the least. Here was two of the most important messages that I delivered when I was in Belgrade. Many people ask me about President Putin's visit there. And I want to say this here as well, because I think it's important. The United States views our friends in a fundamentally different way than Russia views its friends. For Russia, you are either with them or against them. There is no in-between. Ukraine found that out the hard way. That is not how the United States views our relationships with friends. We understand that countries in this region, countries in Eastern Europe, should have the ability to orient themselves towards the European Union, have a full trading relationship, full political relationship with the West, with the Euro-Atlantic economy, but also be able to maintain economic and political ties to Russia as well. People ask me, well, is this visit going to damage U.S. relationships with Serbia? Fundamentally for me, and this is just speaking as one United States senator, the answer is no, that we understand that countries can have multiple friends, and we don't force you to choose, but we do believe that there are moments when you have to choose. We do believe that there are moments when one of your friends has violated international law. There are moments when you do have to choose which side you are on. And we are at one of those moments right now, where we are asking our friends in this region to choose to stand with us in imposing sanctions against Russia for their aggression in Ukraine. And we are paying attention to who chooses to side with us and who does not. The second thing I said is that with respect to the agreement with Kosovo, the Brussels agreement, yes, it is difficult to move forward with implementation without a government formed here in Pristina. And that is another reason why it is critically important for this process to find a way to completion. But that is not an excuse for no progress to be made in Belgrade. And Brussels has given a list of the items that can move forward with respect to implementation of the dialogues without a government being formed here in Kosovo. And so, while it is very difficult to take steps forward, that does not provide a total, complete excuse for Serbia to stand still. So there were a variety of messages that I relayed, but those were two at the top of the list. Here's the last. I'm going to finish where I started to bring us out of the specific and back to the general. And I said this to some students earlier in my visit. When I was running that first race for the state legislature when I was about your age, I remember all the people who told me that I couldn't do what I wanted to do, that I was too young, that I was too new, that I was too inexperienced, and that's never stopped in my relatively brief career. And I remember there were moments when I thought maybe I should stop. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not ready. I remember one afternoon scribbling down a word on a piece of scrap paper on my kitchen. And the word was P-U-S-H, push. And I just put it there on my kitchen and I left it there. And every time that somebody told me that I was going to lose that race, that I couldn't make a difference on an issue that I cared about, I looked at that little scrap of paper and reminded myself, no, just push. Just push. Because what I learned over the years is that people want you to believe that these doors are locked. And they're not really locked. All you have to do is push, and the door is actually open. But you know what? It's these people who want you to believe that you don't have options, because if you realize you do, you start to infringe on their territory, on their privileges, on their preferences. And I hope that I can, leave you with that challenge. This is a moment to dream big for your country, to refuse limitations. Refuse limitations on your life, on your possibilities, on the greatness that you can achieve for your country. What a magical time to be living here in Kosovo. What an amazing moment to be a young person in this country. What an opportunity you have coming out of this university in 2014 or 2015, that people will write about your generation for centuries to come. It gives me little chills just saying that to you, just walking away from here knowing that as we think about the founding fathers and the people who began our nation, as my kids read about them in those textbooks, that there's going to be a handful of you, maybe more than a handful of you, who are going to be looked upon in the same way. Step up to that challenge. Don't let people tell you that you can't do what you want to do for yourselves, for your country, and ultimately for the world. The burden is great, but the opportunity is even greater. Thank you for having me here today.
We thank you, Senator, for that superb presentation. I thank also our many students who turned out this morning, members of the Board of Trustees, Madam Ambassador, and distinguished guests. Thank you for coming. And thank you, Senator, for a superb presentation. Our gift in return is inadequate, but we give you this memory from A.U.K. and Kosovo.